Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. I've ignored him long enough by astronauts. Disclaimer. Always report incidents like this to trusted adults and authorities immediately. Please do not handle similar situations the way I did. It began the summer before I entered high school, 2018. It started with innocent messages on Facebook. I never understood why he continued to message me. After a couple of days of him texting 6 or 7 times in a row without reply, he stated that he was 26, from my hometown but stationed elsewhere in the Army, and had plans to find a young wife to cherish. I made it clear that I was 14 and uninterested, then blocked his account. The next day, he made another account calling me baby girl and telling me that I was what he wanted in a wife. This wasn't the first time I had dealt with an older man interested in me, but naively, I muted the chat and moved on with my life. I stopped thinking about him, enjoyed my summer, and then started high school. Everything was going great until the packages started to arrive. First, a necklace with his name on it, then one shaped like a heart. He had sent the receipts, and they were expensive necklaces. I was terrified that he had found my address, so I showed my mom everything, and my mom tried to return the gifts, and not sure why that was her reaction. But he refused them. Showing my mom the messages was the first time I'd actually read any of them. They were weird, and some were about eloping with me when I turned 16. My mom found out that he went to high school with both of my older siblings. My sister recalled him as a weird anime nerd, and he was friendly towards my brother, also an anime nerd. I ended up blocking a few more accounts and tried to ignore what I thought wasn't that serious of a situation. And after that, we never spoke of him again. One afternoon in November of my freshman year, I was in gym class with some friends when I received a call with no ID. My friends told me to pick it up, thinking it was a telemarketer or spam that we could mess with. We all heard something along the lines of, "I'm waiting outside of the gym for you when you get done with class." We thought it was another friend pranking us and laughed and then moved on. After class, I had a weird gut feeling and tried to leave through the visitor doors, but the coach told me it wasn't permitted. I walked out, and there he was. He grabbed my throat, jammed his mouth against mine, and told me he was disappointed I wasn't wearing the jewelry he got for me, and then walked away. I sprinted to my theater teacher, the only teacher I trusted, and cried for the rest of the day until convincing my brother to pick me up. I blamed the tears on the recent passing of my grandpa. For a while, I kept receiving CDs and mixed tapes. He wrote many songs about me, bracelets and cards until COVID began. But thankfully, I never saw him in person again after that day. The Incident, submitted by Aaron Judge's Bat. It's the 25th anniversary since this happened, and it bothers me to this day. I think you'll see why. My best friend growing up was a guy named Jay. Names have been changed in this story, of course. Jay was a dude through and through. He was a star athlete, wicked smart, and all the chicks were in love with him. He never had a serious girlfriend and did take dates to the dances and prom, but he just never settled on a girl like the rest of us guys. One birthday night, we had just turned 22, and we both shared the same birthday. Hell, we shared everything. He grew up 2 doors down from me, and we were usually in all the same classes and played football, basketball, and baseball. We went to youth group together. We were inseparable. Anyway, we had gone out with some friends to celebrate, and there was something off about the night. We just weren't into partying. I was fighting with my then-girlfriend. She wasn't there. She was busy cheating on me an hour away. College girlfriend, total bitch, not worth any more words in this story. Jay noticed and said, "Fuck this noise, let's blow this joint." And we decided to go back to his house and kill a 12-pack in his backyard around a fire. While we were sitting there just bullshitting, he came out. He told me that he'd been hiding it his whole life and was tired of the charade. At that point, only his parents knew. They were and are awesome folks, and they didn't care. This was the late 90s, and they were very loving and open-minded, and so was I. Honestly, it didn't completely surprise me, but him just busting it out like that did take me off guard. I remember saying something like, "Yeah, tell me something I don't know." And he smiled. Then I said, "Seriously, good for you. I'm sure it feels better telling me." And he nodded and said it did. He then asked if I was mad or upset at him, and I laughed and said, "Shit, no. Dude, you're my brother, and I'll love you for you till the day you die. Plus, it means more chicks for me." And we got a laugh out of that. We were even closer after that night, and I can't tell you how much I loved that guy. If I got into a scrap, he was there to back me up. If he was in trouble for something, I was his wingman. We were inseparable. Jay began to tell more and more people and seemed to relax a little more in his own skin. It was like he had just stopped pretending he wasn't gay. No more dating girls for the image and that sort of thing. I was happy for him, and everyone we knew was supportive to the max, too. But later that summer, everything fell apart. A group of us decided to rent a cabin at a nearby lake for a long weekend. There were about 12 of us, guys and girls, some of them couples and some singles. I had dumped my girlfriend by that time and had attracted the eyes of our high school prom queen, who was now working as a kindergarten teacher and part-time model. I was also a teacher, so we had a lot in common. I felt like I had hit the jackpot. I was happy, Jay was happy, and the summer was starting off awesome. On the second night of the weekend, we were having a bonfire and drinking and smoking and just having a riot. We swam at the beach all day and had a huge lobster and clam bake that afternoon. Now we were just relaxing around the fire and listening to Dave Matthews. It was heaven. Christy, I'll call her, was snuggling in, and all was well with the world. Everyone was getting pretty saucy, and this guy I'll call Dave kept saying he wanted to take this little dinghy out on the lake to a little island. But no one wanted to go out there with him. He finally convinced Jay to go. Mind you, everyone at the weekend party knew Jay was gay, and that is important. For some reason, when I heard that, I got a bad feeling and almost told him not to go. It was a stupid idea with everyone drinking. But Jay assured me that he had had nothing all day and was fine. And that was true, I thought. He hadn't joined in the debauchery like the rest of us. But with Christy getting frisky, me being tipsy, I just let it go. That was the last time I saw my friend. We kept on partying, and Christy and I spent the night together, and no one noticed anything was wrong until the next morning, when another friend, Eric, said, "Hey, where's Dave and Jay?" They hadn't come back. It was still pretty early when I wandered out of our room to get coffee and a smoke. And immediately, I knew something was wrong. Eric and I didn't say anything to anyone else and just ran out of the house and down to the beach. As we got there, we saw Dave lying on the beach with no sign of the dinghy or Jay. Dave was passed out drunk, and it took a minute for us to wake him up. I kept yelling, "Where's Jay? Where the fuck is Jay?" And Dave just groggily looked at us and said, "Huh? I don't know." We asked where the dinghy was and got the same stupid hungover answer. My anger and fear was rising. We knew Jay wasn't in the house. I saw his unmade bed on the way to the kitchen, and he was not out here. Eric told me to calm down and that maybe he was in his truck or somewhere else sleeping off a drunk. But I told him that Jay hadn't been drinking. And I did calm down a little. Something was still eating away at me. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right, just like the night before. Dave was in a brain fog and wasn't saying much, which I thought was odd. But we all went back to the house to see if Jay would turn up. But by noon, he wasn't back. Another friend said we needed to call the cops, and I was already ahead of him. The partying atmosphere was over, and everyone was concerned. Except Dave. He just sat off on the porch drinking more beer. He didn't say much to anyone. Long story short, the police found the dinghy floating adrift against the shore about a half a mile away, but no sign of Jay. A team of divers came out, and the place was overrun with cops asking everyone all kinds of questions. At one point, they even had a helicopter in on things. They questioned us in groups, and they questioned us alone. Jay was gone, and even though some hoped he was just passed out somewhere, I knew in my heart that wasn't true. And I was right. Around 6 p.m., a diver found him, drowned. My best friend since I was 5 was gone, and no one knew why. Or, I knew someone knew and wasn't telling the truth. Piece by piece, we learned what David told the cops, but didn't tell us right away. He said they had made for the island in the dinghy, but somewhere along the line he said Jay started acting weird and kept standing up in the little boat. His story was that Jay had capsized the dinghy and they both went overboard, and in his drunken stupor he knew enough to swim towards some lights on the shore and ended up on the beach and then passed out. At first the officials said it was accidental drowning, that Jay fell overboard and drowned due to being drunk, but we all told him that he hadn't been drinking at all. To be honest, Dave seemed kind of pleased that that was the story the cops were going with. But his story didn't explain the large mark on Jay's head and neck, a mark that was about the size of an oar. What Dave had also left out was that he had a skirmish with Jay earlier the day when we were playing volleyball, and Dave a little too roughly pushed Jay away from him, calling him a fag, and it wasn't sounding like a good-natured ribbing. The autopsy proved that there was nothing in Jay's system, and the final ruling was death by accidental drowning. I was so livid that I knew, we all knew that there was more to the story than what David said. But that was it. Dave stuck to his bullshit story, and even when Jay's parents sued him, nothing came of it. Dave, however, was ostracized by everyone in our group. Hell, the entire town. Everyone knew he was not telling the truth, and he eventually moved away to L.A. We lived in North Carolina, by the way. So yeah, I lost my best friend, and another guy I considered a friend was a killer. Of that fact, I am certain. A bigoted killer who got away with it. I heard he turned into a massive alcoholic and died of drinking just last year. Alone. But I can't say alone. I'm sure the memory of Jay and what I'm sure happened haunted him to his very last day. I guess this story really isn't that scary, but to me it is for 2 reasons. 1, you never really know who around you is capable of killing another person. And 2, that life is so fleeting, it can be taken away in a second, and for really fucked up reasons. I've taken up enough of your time. As you say, Uncle Jay, everyone be excellent to each other, even the people you don't agree with. I sure miss my friend. Rest in peace, Jay. Attacked in the Park by Malkos Music. When I was 10 years old, I went to the park with a friend. At the time, there was an event, I'm not sure what the correct word is, but it was kind of an event where there were animals you could pet, cotton candy exhibits and exhibitions, in addition to places you could buy things. I mention that because it's relevant later. I bought a small plastic toy sword at one of the stalls, and my friend and I went off away from the event into the playground section of the park. We were just playing around with my toy sword when we were approached by a group of teenagers a few years older than us. I can't remember exactly what was said at first, but they led us over to an area that had a wooden picket fence. They seemed nice at first, so we weren't scared or anything. That was until a couple of the guys suddenly out of nowhere grabbed us. There were 3 or 4 of them in total. One guy was holding each of us, and the other two guys were just standing back laughing. They also positioned themselves so no one could see what was happening to us. The guys started to get aggressive, and we were only 10. We were really scared. They started trying to force my head into the space between the picket fence and said they were going to kick our ass. We tried calling out for people, but were met with more physical violence. Luckily, I still had that little plastic sword that they hadn't taken from me. In the panic I was in, I was able to smash the hilt of the sword into the neck, face, or shoulder of the guy holding me. I don't remember. I must have smashed him hard enough to hurt him because he let me go, and the guy holding my friend was distracted. In that split second, me and my friend bolted away. The teenagers chased us nearly all the way back to the event, swearing at us, telling us what they were going to do with us when they caught us. But thankfully, we made it back okay, and then we just clung to my friend's mom for the rest of our time there. To those bullies at the event, let's never meet again. Super Bowl Spike by 2 Cents Nuisance. In 2008, I had just moved to a new state. I didn't know anyone. I had no friends and no family where I lived. Over the years, I developed a few close friendships with a few couples in my apartment complex, and we would often get together and have little parties, nothing serious, just some drinks, card games, and sometimes just movie nights. It was usually couple A, couple B, me, and then randomly scattered throughout were men they'd invited to subtly try to matchmake us. One day, we all decided to get together for a Super Bowl party. I think it was Eagles and Patriots. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember. The party was going to be at one of the random guy's apartments, and as it turned out, he was only a few apartments down from mine. I decided to go over a little earlier to help him set up for it. I'd met him many times, and although he seemed odd, I never got creeper vibes until that day. He was quiet and was watching me a little too intently. At one point, I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, I opened my drink and took a tiny sip. It literally only touched the tip of my tongue. Something about that drink, though, didn't taste right. It had a fuzzy metallic taste, so I decided to not have any more. I just put the lid back on and sat down. If he had been watching me before, it was nothing compared to his gaze at that moment. Suddenly, I felt very ill. I ran to the bathroom because I felt like I might throw up. When I got inside, I locked the door and sat on the toilet. Every pore in my body opened at once, and I began to sweat profusely. The room was spinning, and I was having mini blackouts. I knew I had to leave, so I ran out of the bathroom, grabbed my purse, and walked out the door. That was the last thing I remember. When I came to, I was on my knees. My body was outside of the car, my face was planted in my car seat. I reasoned that I had reached the car, opened the door, and then I was out. I don't know how long I was out, but the last thing I remember was grabbing my purse and leaving. I was in a total blackout from the moment I left his apartment to the time I got to my car. The confusion and fear I felt as I woke was like nothing I had ever experienced. I looked around and realized where I was and saw the guy standing in his apartment, smoking a cigarette and watching me from his patio door. He was watching me, and thankfully didn't try to help me or get me back into his apartment. I jumped up, got in the car, and locked the door. My heart was pounding, and then I blacked out again. I would wake up, realize where I was, and then pass back out. Every time I gained consciousness, I felt so vulnerable. And this happened 5 or 6 times. After a bit, I woke up and didn't pass out again. I was able to start my car and get out of there. I somehow made it to my apartment, which was only a few apartment blocks over. But it took a long time. I was able to make it to my building, and I called Couple A and told them what had happened, but they didn't believe me. I asked them to grab my soda bottle when they went to the party so I could take it to a police station. and they later claimed they couldn't find it. I guess they just forgot or didn't care. I pretty much stopped talking to them. When my lease was up, I moved. I figured if my friends didn't believe me, and without evidence, I couldn't really go to the police. He said, she said kind of things never go anywhere when it comes to the cops. Sometimes I think about how my body reacted to just the tiniest sip. I hate to think what would have happened if I had taken a full drink of it, and I'm so thankful I didn't. So, creepy Super Bowl spiker, let's never meet again. Sexting with a Psycho by Psycho Shade. A few years ago, I was at one of the lowest points in my life. My wife had left me, so I was alone, heartbroken, and depressed. I didn't have many friends, so I had nowhere to go. I would just walk around stores for hours, so I wouldn't have to be at home by myself thinking about how shitty my life was. I very nearly committed suicide on more than one occasion, but somehow talked myself out of it each time. During that time, I happened across an adult webcam site that I would hang out on, not only for the obvious reason, but also because I could actually chat with people. And eventually, I started broadcasting myself. If you've never been to one of these sites, think Twitch, but with nudity. People could view your cam, tip you, and subscribe to be notified when you were online. I didn't have many people in my room at first, but eventually I started getting a few anonymous viewers, and it was kind of exciting that someone was watching me. Before long, I was up to dozens of viewers and some subscribers. I even started getting some tips and making a little money, doing something that, let's face it, I was going to do every evening anyway. It was mostly guys watching me, of course, but although I'm straight, it didn't bother me too much. It gave me people to talk to, at least. I would, however, get females, or at least guys saying they were female, from time to time. Eventually, a girl named Britt started stopping by regularly. She was different than most of the people I met on the site because she actually seemed interested in talking to me, and I, of course, enjoyed the attention. Whenever she'd stop by, the whole room would become a lot more fun. We started private messaging, and I even made her a moderator for my room. She asked me if I had Kik, which at the time I'd never even heard of, but she explained it was a texting app that you don't have to give out your number to use. So we started chatting offline using that. We would talk for hours. I found out she lived halfway across the country, which I actually liked because there would be no pressure to meet in person right away. We sent pictures, and she was very attractive, and at some point began sexting with one another. Even though I doubted much would ever really come of it, it was great for me because it gave me someone to talk to, and it was really helping me rebuild my shattered self-esteem and confidence. This went on for a few months, and eventually we started talking less and less. I kind of expected that this wasn't going to go anywhere, so it didn't bother me when she stopped responding altogether. I never held any illusions that this was going to be a long-term relationship. I figured she had found someone near her and decided that someone she could actually be with was better than a long-distance fling with something she'd never met in person. It was fine. By that point, I had met a few girls myself, so I wasn't too upset. I did miss chatting with her sometimes because I had really enjoyed talking to her, and she'd been there for me during a pretty dark time. Anyway, I went on with my life and started dating someone, and we ended up going on a trip to the beach together. A couple of days after I got back, I got a message from Britt asking if I was in Florida. What the fuck? How would she know I was in Florida? I said no, but I had been there last week. She said she was there now, and we must have just missed each other. We talked for a bit, and she asked me where I had stayed and told me she was just down the street from that hotel. When I told her that I had been there with someone, she got pretty upset and then stopped messaging me again. I was a little confused and more than a little weirded out that she had known where I had been, but I didn't think too much of it. I told myself it must have just been a strange coincidence and forgot about it. Then things took a turn for the worse. A few weeks later, I got another message from Britt late at night after my girlfriend had gone to sleep. Who the fuck is she? I had no idea how to respond to her. I asked her what the fuck she was talking about, and she went on to describe my girlfriend and asked me why I thought I could get away with cheating on her. I was literally floored. Not only had I never been in an actual relationship with Britt, I had never even met her in person. On top of that, she had stopped speaking to me for months, and now suddenly she knew what my girlfriend looked like and was accusing me of cheating on her? I expressed all of this to her and then asked her how she knew what my girlfriend looked like, thinking she was Facebook stalking me or something. Her reply made my jaw drop, and it felt like somebody had just tossed a brick into the pit of my stomach. Because I can see her in your fucking bed. I immediately closed the blinds and checked the house and made sure the doors and windows were locked. I told her that we'd never been in a relationship, and that we were most definitely not in one now. I asked her to please leave me alone and not contact me again. She just responded, "Wow," and with a smiley face. It was at that point that I noticed the light on my webcam was on. She had somehow hacked into my computer and turned my fucking webcam on. I unplugged it and threw it in the closet. Then Britt sent me another message. "Aw, you're no fun anymore." I reiterated to her that this was unacceptable, and I did not want to talk to her again, and that if she didn't leave me alone, I would contact the police. Then I blocked her from every form of communication I had ever used with her and uninstalled Kik. The next day I had my cable company change my IP address, and I haven't heard from her since. But I'm still paranoid that this isn't over. We Encountered a Mimic or an Entity by Revolutionary Yam. My whole life I haven't really believed in ghosts or the paranormal. And something strange happened just a few nights ago. I had to watch my mother's cats in Illinois for roughly 8 days while she was away in Florida visiting my grandmother. For some context, the water was off, so there were no pipes running. The cats were upstairs, and there were no clocks or electronics in the basement. I thought this would be a good opportunity to visit the house since it had nice AC and a nostalgia factor since I had lived there when I was a kid and showed up every day to hang out with the cats before my shifts. For more context, the house was built in 1939, and I'm not sure if the owner died in it. But the second to last day of being at my mother's house, I had brought my girlfriend over to hang out for a bit before we both had to go to work. We were sitting on the couch having a good time eating ice cream and watching Fulcrum on YouTube. I decided to make a silly noise because we were home alone and I wanted to make her laugh. So I made this weird cat call noise in a funny voice. Sort of like the whistle, but with the back of my throat. But then we heard a voice replicate the noise in a very different voice coming directly from the basement. It sent an uneasy feeling down our spines, so naturally we both looked at each other. We both had a what the fuck look on our face, and asked each other if we had heard it. We did. I got a bit spooked and started to freak out, so I got up and walked over to the basement door and said, "Hello?" To no response. I just closed the door and continued freaking out, so we left the house. I stayed one more day and didn't notice anything weird, but the next occurrence happened in the doorway of our apartment the day after my mom got back from Florida. My girlfriend and I were walking into our complex, and we heard upstairs, ee-ee-er-er-ee-ee-ee, in sort of a male digital voice. So we finally got upstairs, and no one was in the hallway, and this was around 7 a.m. And it sounded like it was right in front of us where our apartment door was. My girlfriend and I started looking at each other weird and freaking out as we didn't see anyone in our apartment or outside in the hallway. But we heard it directly in front of us at our door. Both of us were puzzled by these encounters, and I've been paranoid wondering if something might be out there spiritually. We've been scared in the past before, But what makes this situation different is that we both had this uneasy feeling that we don't normally get. I don't know, this whole encounter has me rethinking things. I guess my question for you guys is, have you ever heard something copy you like that when you were home alone? Weird stuff. Open Doors by Material Broccoli. When we lived in New Orleans, we had a nice little 2-bedroom apartment. Just my girlfriend, now my wife, and I had been living together for over 4 years. The apartment was nice and spacious and came at a great price. We felt pretty lucky. I guess it's relevant to mention that my wife works weekends sometimes and I don't. That meant sometimes I just hung out by myself all day. This particular morning, I woke up early, like really early, 5:30. It was a Sunday, and despite my advances, my girlfriend wasn't in the mood for my shenanigans. So I resigned myself to make some coffee and sit on my computer, lazily browsing the internet. It wasn't notable the first time, so I don't remember when I saw it. But in our little office space, there was a closet. This was full of art supplies for my wife and cleaning supplies for me. The thing I noticed, though, was that it was ajar. Just a little bit, the smallest of cracks. I pushed the door closed without thinking twice and then went to crack some eggs. Breakfast drew my wife out of her slumber, and as she ate, I left the dishes to soak and wandered back over to the bedroom and turned on the TV. She yelled goodbye to me on her way out, and it wasn't long until I was alone. I had barely just begun watching TV and scrolling through my phone. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I must have. I was dreaming of something chasing me, zombies or some variation. Something about the psychology of your friends and loved ones betraying you and becoming a threat always shook me to the core. My eyes snapped open, and I thought I heard footsteps. I looked around and saw nothing. The clock said 9 a.m. My girl wouldn't have been back that early, and maybe it was just part of the dream, I thought. I sat back and tried to play some video games on the computer, but nothing really scratched the itch that I had. I glanced over and saw the door to the closet open again. Just a crack, just large enough for someone to see through. I thought that to myself, and it gave myself goosebumps. Then I shook my head. Nah, I'm not interesting enough for someone to hide in my closet. But I opened the closet door to confirm my feelings. There was nothing but a tray of paints that had gotten stale because someone forgot to put the caps back on. And there was a vacuum that someone forgot to empty. I blamed both on my girlfriend and closed the door, closing it tightly and even giving it a light tug to make sure. I walked back to the master bedroom to shower, and looking over I saw the spare room closet door open. Just a crack. Just a small hair open. I had a stomach-drop panic moment, and I tried to shake it off. Again, who's going to hide in my little-ass apartment? I walked over with the confidence of a high school jock in a 90s slasher movie, opened the door to the closet, and was met with nothing but Christmas decorations and my interview suit. There wasn't enough room to even hide in the closet if you wanted to. So I closed the door the same as the other closet, tugging on the knob to make sure it was tightly closed. I then began to imagine what I would actually do if someone was in there. The answer was probably shit the bed and run. Everything continued normally from there. I made lunch, played online with some friends, and just loafed around the apartment. My girlfriend came home and we made dinner together, and as we were getting ready for bed, I remembered the silly things happening that morning and looked over to see the spare room closet door open. Just a little bit. Just enough for someone to watch someone else from. I knew I had closed it. I knew it couldn't just blow open on its own. I walked up and opened the door expecting something but found nothing again. I pushed the suit back and rooted around looking for some reason. Was I going crazy? I thought about saying something to my girlfriend, but didn't. Every time I walked by that room, I checked the door, and the latch was closed. It had never opened. The other closet remained closed too, and I checked the other parts of the apartment, cabinets in the kitchen, spare bathtub, master closet, anywhere a person might hide. I never found anyone. I didn't sleep well that night and woke up into the tiniest noises. Every time I checked, there was nothing. The doors were firmly closed, and I finally found some peace and slept. That morning I woke up and found the front door was open. Just a little bit. Just a crack, just enough for someone to look in and see us. We moved across the country. We have a house now, and at my demand, we have cameras covering all the entrances. I am certain someone was in my apartment, but I can't prove it. My wife thinks I'm just paranoid and have watched too many movies, but I know someone was opening those doors. So, okay, I'm going to spoil the mystery here. I actually found out my wife, whom I had lived with for 4+ years, likes doors to be open because she thinks the closets smell stale when they're closed. She had been opening closet doors for years on me. I just hadn't noticed until I was home alone and a little paranoid. If you notice, each door open lines up with the time she was home to this day, but I found those closet doors that shouldn't have been open. But I'm not lying about the cameras. Those are the only ways I feel comfortable knowing it's just her opening the doors in my house. The front door was open that morning, and it was probably that we just forgot to lock it and it blew open. Right? Right? Therapy by Homus. This happened around 1995. In freshman year of middle school, 6th grade, there was a once-a-week group therapy session with developmentally delayed kids that involved them doing some crafts activity or playing with Legos or watching a movie as a group. It was half normal kids, half DD kids, and the normal kids could sign up for it. I signed up pretty instantly, as it meant an escape from history once a week. One of my best friends at the time had the same idea, and it basically turned into a second lunch period for us. The whole thing was overseen by a therapist named Bruce, and it was pretty generally laid back. Bruce was an overweight 50-ish balding guy with the attitude and general appearance of Santa Claus. He ran most of the school's extracurriculars and was pretty much universally liked. The other important player in this story was a kid who I'll call G. You know that stereotype of psychopaths being obsessed with animal torture as a kid? This was dead-on G. He'd regularly tell these long, excited stories during group about how much fun he had last week tearing the leg off a squirrel he had caught in his live trap, or some other similar thing. Most of us ignored him, as it was just sort of assumed that he was all talk and just making up gross stuff to get attention. So, one week we were playing with Play-Doh. Since it was a DD group, the huge tub of Play-Doh had long since assumed a uniform shade of turd brown, and the general drive was to get people to build things and tell stories about them. Most people just built dinosaurs or threw clay at each other. G, for whatever reason, had a huge flat square slab laid out and was building 4 large pillars on the corners. He eventually put a roof on it, which wouldn't stay on due to the lack of interior supports. The normal kids would always leave a few minutes early as the group ran right into the start of the next period and we'd need time to get to class. I was no different, and walked out while Bruce and the DD kids were smashing the Play-Doh, giggling and throwing chunks of turd dough back into the bin. I got to my next class, and the teacher wasn't there. Nobody knew what was going on. About 10 minutes later, she finally showed up looking frazzled and wouldn't give us any information other than something happened that needed staff attention. Being 6th graders, we went nuts with speculation. A few hours later, I ran into the friend from group who was visibly jumpy and disturbed. He wouldn't tell me why other than mentioning that therapy group was canceled indefinitely. I kept prying for information and eventually got the story out of him. During the cleanup, the Play-Doh had to be compacted back into its tub. This involved lots of smashing Play-Doh sculptures, a bit that the DD kids greatly enjoyed to the point where they'd try to smash other people's stuff. G's house was one of the last things to go. He smashed down 2 of the columns and then let one of the other DDs smash another, and finally dared Bruce to smash the last one really hard. The last one with an open pocket knife in it. I never saw Bruce or G ever again. She was dead and I didn't even know it. By Anonymous. About 5 years ago, I was living at home with my parents and my twin brother. Every morning around 7 a.m., we would both head out for a run. We had mapped out this giant loop that we would run, and to make it a bit of a competition, I would run it in one direction, and my brother would run it in the other direction. That way we could run and stay focused. Part of this loop was on the main street of the city that my parents lived in. On the main road, there were these shady apartments kind of hidden by a bunch of trees. The direction I was running, the view of those apartments was obscured by a giant hedge bush, and I couldn't see the apartments until I was right in front of them. Out of my peripheral vision, I saw a woman standing among the trees just staring at me. I immediately got the chills, but didn't turn around to face her because I didn't want to be rude. So I just ran on and forgot about it. I passed my twin about 10 minutes later. When I got home, my brother wasn't back yet, so I went about the rest of my morning routine, including taking a shower. I got out of the shower, and my brother still hadn't come back, and I was starting to get a bit worried. An hour after I had gotten home, he was still not back, so I called him. He told me he was on his way home, and he had something that he needed to tell me and my parents. When he finally did get home, he told us that as he was running in front of those apartments, he saw a woman hanging from the trees in front of him. As soon as it was obvious that he'd seen her, a man came sprinting from the apartments wailing and screaming, "No, I can't believe she did this!" And he grabbed her body and laid her on the ground and started performing CPR. It was pretty obvious he was her husband. My brother called the local police, and they dispatched an ambulance and police officers. My brother had to stay for questioning and fill out a witness report and all that jazz. He was obviously troubled by it, and since he was going the opposite way that I was running, he didn't have the hedge obscuring his views and got a straight-on view of this woman hanging there. It's still hard for me to believe that the woman I saw staring at me out of my peripheral was dead the entire time. We did find it very sketchy that the husband came running out as soon as it was obvious that someone had discovered the body. I mean, that's a little bit too convenient if you ask us. But I don't want to say that this man killed his wife without any evidence. My brother was never followed up with by the police, leading me to believe that the death was ruled a suicide. I just can't fathom that if I would have turned to face that woman, I would have discovered her about 20 minutes earlier than my brother had. And it deeply troubles me that I didn't. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Thanks for sending in the listener-supported stuff recently, guys. I love reading those submissions. And to the guy who sent this story in about losing his buddy, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's pretty fucked up. And I guarantee that if the guy really did kill your friend, he lived with that until the day he died. Also threw in a couple of the classics in this episode. It's been a while since I've done that. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Follow me on social media. Links to that are in the description. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, there's a link to my Patreon page down there in the description and my storefront at tpublic.com. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.